So first off, welcome back-ish / welcome. We're thrilled
Yeah.
to have you here. I had mentioned over in our club Slack that, of course, you think contributed to about maybe 18 club projects that I'm aware of. Led,
Was it that much? I think it was maybe a bit less. I think
I,
over 10. Over
I
10.
did Control F on our itch page, and granted, some
Yeah,
of it was like it might have been like another club
yeah.
reused your particle system authoring code in some
Or a
other
sprite.
project or something like
Yeah,
that.
or yeah, the small stuff sometimes,
Yeah,
but
maybe like a dozen, maybe more
uh-huh.
directly, and then led Spell Spiel, Arca Ninja Droid. Were those the two, or
Yep.
is it?
Yep, Spell
Yep.
Spiel and Arcanine Droid, yeah. I have it in my little PowerPoint thingy.
Oh,
Uh,
nice. Yeah, if you want to screen share with the
yeah,
PowerPoint, that
yeah, I'm
is
gonna do that. It's
excellent.
not amazing, so I just press share. Okay, so yeah, thanks for the introduction, Chris. Again, congrats to everyone. Congrats to the current project and also the release of Kong 2. Super happy to see that and to see that the club is still going so well. I'm really excited to be talking to you guys a little bit about my time in AAA so far. I'm actually going to be splitting this talk into sort of three mini parts. The first one, just telling you what I've been up to for those of you who know me and would like to know or are interested in that. I'm going to try and make it short. And then after that, talking about sort of the things that I've learned since then, and being like an ex-member that it wasn't that long ago that I left the club, so I still I'm still fresh in sort of that space, and I can sort of see the things that I didn't know before, um, and give my perspective, and then talk about have a discussion if this is the kind of stuff like the differences between being in the club versus being in AAA, and if that's something that you would want for yourself or not. So first of all, am I supposed to know this guy? Yeah, as Chris said, I led two projects in the club and contributed to a bunch of them. I was a member of HomeTeam GameDev, which was Gamkedo, for 2 years, I think from 2017 to 2019. And since June, I've been an animation programmer at Ubisoft Montréal. So I'm just going to give a little bit of the process that led up to that and also talk about what I've been up to since then. Yeah, I'm gonna come back to that one. So since I started my process to try to get in the industry when I was in the fall before I graduated, and I graduated in April. So I started like really, um, really before, like months before, attending events and things like that, and that kind of helped sort of getting me into the mindset of talking with recruiters and getting your CV done and getting a website done and all of that stuff. And that was really, really useful. Um, of course, my portfolio was full of Gamkedo projects. I mean, HomeTeam GameDev projects. Sorry, you're gonna have to cut that. And after all of that build up, I participated in the Ubisoft Game Lab, which is sort of the competition. It's a 10-week thing where they go in universities and sort of universities make their teams and make a game prototype in 10 weeks. And I guess I should say prototype because the quality of the games on that floor are absurd. These are games that if I told you you could buy them in an indie game store, you would believe me. So this is us winning the best prototype. I don't know if you can see me in this picture. No, actually, you can't see me in this picture because we did not win. We weren't close. Like by far, and I'm not trying to be negative, but we had some of the, if not the worst game on the floor, one of the worst games. Like it wasn't great. So we didn't win, but it did give me the opportunity to have someone look at my stuff, right? And then when they looked at that, maybe they went, oh, well, their prototype wasn't that good, but there's club games, right? There's other things that I've done that maybe could have been more interesting to them. So I guess that was sort of my first realization of like, once you've gotten sort of prototypes and games, and you guys already kind of have that, right? Since you've been in the club for I don't know how long, then the next objective is get eyeballs, get eyeballs on your things because like I've seen what the recruiters do, and they don't read through CVs all day. They have human contact like 95% of their days. So that was my first big realization. After that, I went into a program called the Warm Up at Ubisoft, which is basically when you're already hired, and then you do a sort of training just for graduates, where they do math training, they do C++ training, because I didn't do any C++ in the club, and also a bunch of other things, presentations, which we had to do also. So it was kind of it's a 2.5-month thing. And then after that, you have another set of internal interviews, and then you get assigned to a project, and that's what I've been doing for 3.5 months. So okay, that's done. That's done with the catching up. So now the stuff that you might care about more, which is the skills that I've seen for AAA. And I'm going to say that exist, but maybe they're more important than you think, and you should emphasize that you have them. Because sometimes actually, I'm just going to go ahead. Little disclaimer, I'm saying this from the perspective, one, of a programmer, and two, of an engine programmer. So it's not exactly, if your goal is to be a concept artist, maybe it applies, I'm not sure. So there you go. Number one thing, oh my goodness, reading code. Reading code is so much more in AAA than writing code. It's hard to understate just how impressive, like, it's crazy. So I'm going to separate it, like, talking about how it applies and then why you have it. So it applies because the engine is huge. The engine it's crazy how many, like, we're talking about hundreds of files. In the first week that I went, it's literally just reading, like, you have a small task and it's just like, try to fix this, but really you're reading through all of the stuff and trying to understand how the hell all of this works. And almost all the tasks that I have in an engine position is fixes and tweaks of features that already exist. Now, of course, I'm a junior, so I'm not responsible for making all the fancy new features, but still. And on top of that, brute force debugging, and by that I mean, you're in Visual Studio and then you debug by pressing, like, going through code step by step, is slow. It's long. It's so long. But if you understand what the code does, well, reading is much faster. And that's great because in the club you have that, right? We were just seeing Kung Tu. Was it 18 programmers? It's something like that. 18. Like, the project in itself has its own mini engine, and in a way, having to deal with the code base of a bunch of people is really important. And I think what I would want to emphasize also is, we like to think, well, I'm going to do, like, the system. I'm making the system. I'm making the whole engine of, even in club projects, of this part. And that's great. But if you're the kind of person that's like, hey, the project's almost going to release in like 1 or 2 weeks, and we still want some small features, and you have the skill to jump in on a project that has more than 15 coders and make your thing and understand what was going on, that's just as valuable. That's a big part of what you're going to do if you are in AAA again. So capitalize on that if you can, and don't sell yourself short if you feel like you haven't done, recoded the entire universe and simulated quantum particles, in Unity. It's not it's not necessarily that important. In engines, sometimes I do things where it's like you spend days trying to understand what the hell's going on, and then the actual submit is just taking this and just putting it under, and now it works. Writing, maybe reading is more important than writing. Also, multitasking. Things are slow. Did you know? In AAA, things are slow. Everything is slow. There's no Unity play button. You're going to miss it. In Unity, you code things, and you're like, I have to wait 2 seconds for the little play button to go back, and now you click. That's not how it is. And so, first of all, if you're a good programmer, you cannot make too many mistakes of, like, doing something and then, I have to stop everything and recompile and reboot the game. But yeah, things are slow. So you have to multitask. Also, I wrote, people contact you and your tasks sort of pile up. That's just how it is. Everyone is the same. So if you can switch focus, that makes or breaks your productivity. You have to be able to go, okay, I'm doing my thing, build, and you're compiling things, and then in the meantime, you go do something else. You write an email, or you just read through, you keep reading through the code, or whatever it is you're doing. But you can't stare at the screen and wait for things to compile, because it just doesn't work, And you have it in the club again, and you could highlight that. I would highlight that as saying, well, you have game dev and then you have everything else, in the same way. Of course, you don't have the long compile times if you're doing a JavaScript game. That's the reason why we do it in a way. But the way that you have to juggle with game dev and other things, there's a parallel to do that. So, writing messages, making slides, and that sort of shares the space, and that's really important if you ask me. So mention these things, multitasking, mention it, even if it's simple. And communication, haha, overused, but it's worth mentioning. If you're in a big team, you're talking to strangers like all the time, or semi-strangers, like acquaintances that you work with them, but you don't talk with them that much. And the thing is, it's not the talking with strangers, it's the fact that they're all busy. Everyone's busy. So there's sort of not awkwardness, but there's this thing of like, well, you have to interact with people that don't necessarily want to interact with you that long, in the sense that they have a very pragmatic mind of like, well, what's your problem? Can I help you with this problem? Or how can I help you or you help me? But it's very short and to the point. And so you have to operate in that space where you, first of all, don't have to be not offended, but if people seem rude, they're not rude. They're just being efficient if they're very experienced. And you also have to, be kind of that way, as in you don't want to be too chatty, but also not rude yourself. So it's something that I struggle with a little bit, because if you don't have that, then you risk being stuck at your desk doing your things and not wanting to bother anyone, or doing the other way around, just being all chatty. So, and this is one where in the club it's obvious that you have it, because you talk with strangers or acquaintances in the club all the time. And in the same way, they have their own obligations. You can't just go up to people and say, "Hey, I want this sprite done by this date." That's not how it works. So you have their own obligations, and you develop the mentality of, well, you have your own project, and I'll be happy with what you can give me. So if you have 2 hours to play in the game, great. If you only have 15 minutes, that's great too. And in a funny way, this is kind of what happens in the job also. People have a stack this big of things to do, and you're kind of like, I'll be happy with what you can give me. So communicating is a big thing. And if you are in a situation where you have to talk about this, maybe don't just say, "Oh, I'm in a club and we're working with a bunch of people and it's super great and we make games." You can highlight that this is part of the thing where it's like, and on one hand, we have the power of numbers that we can make great games, but also we have to contend with those obligations and we have to work together. So highlight it. And finally, another one that I wanted to mention is autonomy. So you always have more than one task. That's just how it is. And your manager doesn't micromanage you. That's one of the things that, that's just how it is. So in a way, you have to be able to evaluate your own priorities and be like, I'm working on this, and only ask informed questions, which kind of goes back to what I just said of, you don't want to ask people all the time about everything. So you try it out yourself, and then you evaluate priorities and you ask informed questions. Again, the club is kind of like that, right? You have all the projects that all have their priorities, and you choose what you do. You self-assign tasks to yourself most often. And although you don't necessarily have, because in the club there's more the mentality of, well, if you want to do just sprites and you want to do 100 sprites, you do them. It's not like that, and you kind of have to do what you have to do. But still, especially if you're a project lead, then you have to put those priorities more important, because you're responsible for release. And the other thing that I wanted to talk with that is, I said autonomy is about asking informed questions and sort of doing things yourself. But if you do time with Chris or the other mentors in the club, I don't know how many mentors we have now, it's kind of the same idea, which is you try it out yourself, and then when you get stuck, that's when you ask for help, guidance of like, here's the questions that I've amassed. I'm going to ask you specifically those things, other than saying, hey, I want to make this. How do I do this? That's, that's not necessarily the best thing. And it's not the most useful for anyone. If a company's hiring you, they're going to train you. They know that they're going to invest into training you. So if you can demonstrate that you can be mentored, that you're mentored well, and you receive and sort of like take that like a sponge, just absorb everything. I think that's valuable. So mentioning that you're mentored with Chris, for example, is something that I did, and I think you should too. And yeah, project leads obviously take it a step further by doing planning and things like that. Now let's talk a bit about the differences. My face is very red right now. And the thing is this a job you enjoy? AAA, and I know I'm going to repeat what Chris has been saying in many ways, but in many ways it doesn't feel like game dev. There's specialization, and that means that you're kind of only seeing what you're working on. Um, Obvious example for me is I'm an animation programmer. So I don't load the whole game. Why would I load the whole game? I'm working in animations. So my job is load an empty scene, drop a character in it, and then test out the animations. So sometimes you're booting something and it's like, wow, there's been all this progress that I haven't been seeing. So it doesn't necessarily feel like you're chipping into that big, it's hard to explain, but you don't see everything and you sort of feel like you're working on your little part. And this is my little part, which is fine, but it doesn't feel like what it feels like when you're in a club team. And this is true in engine programming because most of my work is bug fixing, especially as a junior, and to understand the engines, that's what you do. But even the seniors, that's a lot of what they do, is putting out fires. Also, because everything is slow, there's, when you get into indie dev, and that was the case for me, and that was the case probably for a lot of you, there's the fun of, I'm going to make this thing, and then I'm just going to drop it in, and it's just going to, I'm going to drop the work immediately into the game, and it just appears, and it's like, wow, I can do so many things. The fact that everything is slow, that the work being done is slow, and the engine itself is slow, means that even if the result of your work gets in the game, it's just diluted by time. So you don't necessarily have that satisfaction boost of being like, I'm going to drop my thing and I'm just going to do it. So you have to contend with that little fire. You're not necessarily going to feel that as much. And finally, NDA plus non-compete means that you can't really make games on the side. You could. I could make a game in my basement and not tell anybody, and that would be that. But being something like in the club where it's freeware, game jams, no, not really. Oftentimes they're hosted by Ubisoft, so I couldn't participate in them. So in a strange way, I'm not really I'm a game dev. I'm not a hobby game dev. I'm more of a drummer now. I'm a drummer. And yeah, so it's a sacrifice. There are good things. These are things, what I'm about to say is things that I feel, but it might not be something that you feel. So less responsibility. Even I think the project leads in the club could relate, which is that when you're responsible for the whole game, you really want it to do well, and you feel like it's kind of on your shoulders. In our case, when the game releases, if it has a 5% on Metacritic and people think it's boring, it's not my fault because I'm working in the animations. So if the animations are good and the characters don't T-pose in the middle of the game and everything works well, you know what? And it does relieve pressure, even though you have pressure in your job for animations or things like that. There's less, you don't feel like you have the whole thing on your shoulders. And this leads to emotional detachment from the project. And I haven't been talking about it that much, but for me, I am a very big advocate of detaching yourself emotionally from your creations. And even the games that I did in club games, I tried to do that, where it's just like, you want to take a step back and try to not push the game in a specific direction. Sort of like a parent with a kid, where you just like, you have to let it be its own self. So for me, even though I love the project that I'm on, and I'm very satisfied with the project, every game has animations. So if the project were to be killed or whatever, well, I'm still going to be doing animations. I'm still going to be doing things. So it's not that the project doesn't matter. It matters. We all care about it. But it's not the same thing as an indie developer where like the project is my life. It's not how it is. And so in a way, it becomes kind of a job, where you sort of do your thing and things are slow. So you don't have the massive progress that you would have after an evening of working on a club project. And that's fine, but it's what I wanted. I signed up for this knowing that that's what it was going to be. And I'm happy in my job now and I wouldn't trade it and I don't want to leave. But it might not be what you want because what you do in the club is indie dev and indie dev is different. So I guess those are kind of my thoughts. And I also want to mention that I've been very lucky so far because we all know that the game industry as a whole has a reputation for like overtime and things like that. So far, I've been treated very, very well. If I might, I might come back in a year and be like, you know what, guys? But right now, I've been treated super well, and I haven't been doing crazy crunch time. But also, it's been 6 months, so you can get news from me, and write to me anytime if you want the info on that. So thanks for having me. Keep it up. Guys,
Nice.
I love the club. So yeah, I'm gonna take this off.
I have a couple questions sprinkled in there, and you kind of answered one of them, but I'll pull it up just to kind of address more specifically. Anthony was just asking kind of, do you always even actually know which game you're working on specifically? Or are there times where it's kind of separated and you're somewhere, I don't know, deep core, central tech or something?
I'm sorry, what? I'm
Did,
not sure I get the question.
as an animation programmer, do you always even like
Uh-huh.
know which game you're working on? Or is there so much separation sometimes? Are you working on some sort of like, I don't know, shared tech or unannounced things you don't see yet? Or
There are some people that do that work on tech that isn't related to projects. Like there are departments for like technology and things like that. That's not game specific. In my case, we work pretty close. Like I work very closely with the animators, so like they sit like near me. So I can't really lose sight of, there's never a time where it's like, it just feels like any game. It's like, no, I know what it is. And there's a good, the company does a good job of doing like team meetings and things to sort of build, make you feel like you're part of the big thing precisely to counter that kind of feeling where it's like, well, am I working in my little corner? Um, so no, I wouldn't say that, but I would say that yeah, sometimes you can lose the big picture, even if you don't lose the game itself. Yeah, you could feel that the progress, you're not really sure exactly what's going on in other realms of the, what other people is like design, like how's the game going on design wise, like, I'm animating characters.
got it.
So
Another question also from Anthony was, is there something like the club pitch somehow in terms of, I guess, maybe consolidating a design vision or something that you have access to or that you get to see as part of how these projects kick off or onboard or
what if there was something like being a club, like a team lead?
like the pitch presentations that anytime someone's onboarding any of our teams, right, we show them a video from our club pitch for that project where,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
the high level.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We have that. It's been really nice, especially the first time you sort of get there and there's like a bunch of materials and things like that. So yeah, for sure, it's been great, and yeah, they make that effort of not making you feel like you're just sort of doing the thing. We have team meetings where it's like the whole team, and they have presentations of like, here's literally one feature or one piece of tech that we're working on, and now we're presenting you this, and potentially you could be working with this in the near future. Hasn't happened yet for me, and I'm in a small team because like animation, there's like a few like animation programmers. There's not like so.
H is wondering, and obviously, we're respecting NDAs, etc. But are you able to say how long until what you're working on releases? Is something?
No,
No,
I don't
okay,
think so.
I didn't think so.
Would love
uh,
to say, but
yeah,
you can look forward to it. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be nice. I will say that it's my favorite project at Ubisoft. So
nice. Cole's wondering, how comfortable were you with C++ before you got the job?
I had not made anything in C++ to yeah. I hadn't made anything. You know, if you do Unity C Sharp, you have the gist of it. And honestly, the thing is that writing, I get back to my point of like, they don't expect me to write a bunch of code. So it's like, if you understand C++, like how it works, like header files, what's a header file and a CPP file, what do different kinds of keywords, you can manage. And we did have a bit of training, but not that much training. Like we didn't do like a C++ boot camp kind of thing. So it's not that it doesn't matter, it matters, but it's not that important. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Right on. Marcel's wondering if you'd expand a bit more about what an animation coder is/does.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so basically there's sort of two sides to animation, right? There's the animators, literally the artists that make the animations. So they do like the rigging of characters. They make the animations themselves. And then there's us, which is working on the animation engine. So it's all the implementation. So for example, blending between one animation state and another. When a character is walking and then running, there's a whole engine that handles that. And then a bunch of other technology that tries to make animations as smooth as possible and as performant as possible. Also, there's a bunch of stuff going on for that because, the game's big. And obviously, I'm working in an animation engine that I didn't make myself that already works, so there's a lot of bug fixing going on. But that's the gist of it. You could really see it as the implementation, and also sort of linking that with gameplay. There's a bit of gameplay also because gameplay and animations are like this. So I don't know if that's a good explanation, but I could go there. There's really also like tech, because it's a competitive industry, so there's always tech that's being developed, and I'm not doing a lot of that right now, but getting there. But there are people that's like their job, and one of my mentors, that's what he does.
I have my impression/guess, but H is just wondering if you can clarify the amount in your job, which is code, as opposed to are you doing some things kind of art side in animation programming?
No, it honestly, if you're a math person, you're gonna be better off as an animation programmer than if you're actually an animator. It's like, yeah, yeah. There's no need for animation knowledge because even if there was, I'm surrounded by animators, so it's like, they want your expertise on other things. But math is a big one. Math is a big one because there's a lot of quaternions and rotations and things like that that's involved in that. But actual art, don't worry if you're not an artist.
and just to kind of insert in there is a question: are you ever even, obviously in the club when people are working on their own bits and pieces, they'll at least placeholder a quick test asset or something. Are you ever even popping up in Maya or something to like test it, make a little nothing? Fascinating. Yeah.
Well, it's some people do. When it comes to technology, people do technology, but in terms of assets, because the thing is the asset pipeline is very defined and very like there's a big workflow. So it's like I can't even touch anything. Like if I wanted a placeholder asset, I would ask an animator to do a placeholder asset because they know how it works. So data is not something that I have touched at all. So there you go. That's coming back to being in the club. It's like that's something you do in the club, but not in AAA. Not really.
Makes sense. Vaughn's wondering, do you have some choice in the titles you're involved in, or is it chosen kind of for you?
My thing was a bit different. My hiring process, I mean, usually people, if you're like already an industry person, you're gonna apply to like a project, and obviously in the job description it doesn't say this project, but they'll say like, physics programmer for something, and then you get there, and once you're hired, they're like, hey, this is the game. For me, because I was in the warm up, we actually had like internal interviews, so we had kind of more control because they would say there's this and there's that, and of course I don't have the final decision because it's a two-way thing like any interview. But that it was very good to already be inside so that you can sort of get to choose. But once you're there, there is mobility, so you can choose. And there's also the thing of like, there's a lot of live games going on right now. So if you're someone that's working on Rainbow Six, well, people have been working on Rainbow Six for a long time. So at some point, it's like, well, they will have to move if they want to. So yeah, so you do have choice.
Gotcha. H is wondering if you're able to say how deep the organization is where you're at in terms of layers of management you're dealing with or anything like that.
I guess it would kind of reveal where the project is at.
Fair.
Uh, so
Jeremiah is wondering, what do you feel is most important in getting hired? Club experience, degree, portfolio interviews. Speaking of degree, do I remember your degree is not actually game dev specific, right?
nope, nope. My degree is physics and computer science at University of Montreal, and it's I keep joking, but it is a dead degree in the sense that it's going to go away. Literally, they're going to remove it because there were 3 people physically present at my graduation for our program, and they forgot to mention it when they called out our names. So that gives you an idea. But yeah, I think, and that's another thing that I didn't mention, but now that you asked, it's a really good question. Like people do gameplay. People come from an indie background. They're like, I want to do gameplay. And who doesn't love gameplay? But if you're like a more of a math science person that's just looking, you're not necessarily want to be the person that's programming gameplay. There's they're looking for people like that also. And with my background, that was the 2 things that I feel were the most important. Is like club games one, but also my background where it's just like it's more fundamental sciencey, and I like tech, and I don't necessarily care for doing gameplay. And they were like, oh, like online programming is the same thing. It's like you're not programming gameplay, but you're needed. But yeah, I didn't fully answer the question. What was the most important? The most important was getting a human being to look at my things. That was the most fundamental, pivotal point. The competition that I was mentioning, we were not that good. We weren't that good, but someone looked at it like, if you're invisible, there's nothing is going to help you. So for sure, that's the number one thing. And then portfolio, I think, is really nice. I really recommend having a nice website, because CVs are just like, there's only so much you can do with the CV. Like I feel like they have a lot of rules where it's like it needs to be 1 page, and it needs, font size needs to be this, and you have to optimize stuff. Where a website, it's more like, it's a website, make it however you want, and if it's flashy, well, yay. You have more freedom. So yeah.
Right on. See, Marcel's wondering, what do you think the biggest thing you've improved on in those last 6 months working in AAA?
That's a good question. The biggest thing that I've improved on, I would say that I think it's the multitasking thing that I was talking about earlier. That's one where it's really like you sort of get it, and also reading and understanding how code works. I think those are the 2 things. And working with other people's code, because again, I didn't work that much with other people's code. Even in school, it's like you're working with maybe one other person, or you're doing your own thing, and that's about it. And now suddenly it's like, hey, hundreds of people have touched these things over. So I think that's the biggest one. And other than that, I've been fairly lucky in the sense that they've let me sort of manage my own things and be independent. And I don't, because I'm in a small subsection of animation, which is more specific. I haven't had to like talk with everyone in the company ever. So I've been lucky in that I have sort of my closely knit group of people. But I'm going to maybe be put more on the spot later, once I have more responsibilities, and now suddenly you have to present stuff. Right now, I'm kind of like in the corner, just the manager talks to other people. I'm just like just doing my thing in the corner. Eventually, it will come talk to me with the more important things, but it hasn't happened quite yet.
Right on. Anthony's wondering, how would you know what job you wanted to apply for? Did you know you wanted to be an animation programmer going in?
Actually, that's funny. Well, it's not hilarious, but when I was in the warm up, they asked us what kind of things do you want to do, and I knew that I wanted to do stuff that wasn't gameplay. So I listed physics as first because I have a physics degree. So that's what I wanted to do. I did the interview and I didn't get it. um, and then animation was my second choice, but it was really for the math one. So I knew to an extent because I knew there was mathy. But I don't have that much experience doing animation stuff outside of, I didn't do like a whole animation engine or doing stuff in Unity or things like that. So it's more like I knew what I didn't want to do. There are some things I knew I didn't want to do gameplay because I was like, there's nothing wrong with it. And I knew I didn't want to do online because it's not something that's really stuck with me. So that was, yeah.
Right on. One of the things that also, whenever we have people in the group who are looking for angling for professional work, and I always try to stress with them, like, obviously, like, what we do in the club is helpful and cover some stuff and include it, mention it, and tell the stories, but also very useful to supplement with some other things, right? Whether it's online courses or self-teaching or hobby projects or jams or some other bits and pieces to stand apart from people who only do, freeware hobbyist Steam stuff. Were there some things that you found useful outside of the club that you also did that you feel like helped either in your interview storytelling or in your portfolio or in your skills?
I didn't use my school stuff. I didn't really have school stuff to show off. My friend now is looking for a job, and he's done a bunch of like sciencey, the kind of stuff that Tim would have absolutely done, like simulating planets and things like that. I didn't have that, so I couldn't really play that card. But going to like events, I guess it's pretty much the only thing. Like going to events, I didn't do game jams. Also, by the way, I haven't never done a single game jam. Not that I hate it. I've never tried, so maybe I would love it. Now it's too late. But so there wasn't that. Of course, it could be useful, but yeah, the only thing that the club doesn't really like give you is meeting people, meeting recruiters, meeting things, and sort of getting your face, just so they know your face. Like, it's really the biggest thing. I can't think of anything else.
Was there an element of through the university connection? I know that there's companies out here like, heck, I'll just say it because it's public. Fox Next, or when EALA considered interns, etc. They had university connections as their partnerships or who they would even look at for events. Like, I don't know if that warm-up thing or the event that the competition y'all competed in, were those in any way related to like because you had the university connection, or was that incidental to you were in the area able to participate in those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a university competition, so Ubisoft, they're like, haha, we have a bunch of students and we're going to go get from them, like, obviously. With that said, my university has zero game dev presence. Okay, I mentioned that the projects are top notch, and they are. There's a reason. First of all, the people are very skilled. They often come from game dev programs who have connections. We didn't have connections like that, and they're credited for the competition, which we were not. So not that they're not good, they really are. They're really amazingly talented. They did have an edge. So yeah, it definitely, you're at the floor and you see all these games. Like, we felt good about our game the whole way through until the presentation day, where you have to stand there with your booth and you realize, oh wow, all these games are really, really, really good. And ours, did I mention that the game crashed and it was my fault? I didn't mention that. Yeah, so a little side story. The game crashed every once in a while because it was online. So it worked if your internet connection was functional, or if your internet connection was off, like it disconnected. But if it went off in the middle of gameplay, then the game would crash, which we had not tested, and I was the one that did the online connection thing. So it was great to think that the president of Ubisoft Montreal would have the controller in his hand and then have the game crash in their hand, and it would be my fault. So didn't win the competition.
Yeah.
But the university connection thing, a lot of others had it, but we didn't really, other than obviously being part of that competition membership.
Gotcha. And yeah, and I'm sure people obviously are hearing it in there, but hopefully it's a helpful thing for people to know that like your game can crash and cannot be the award winner, and you can still kind of do all right because like you did your part and you can tell that story and
Uh-huh.
still all that kind of stuff. It's not like, oh, I'm not going to bug the recruiters until I win the contest and my game never
Exactly.
crashes. Uh,
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah, yeah. They're looking, I think, also for a certain profile of people, and you can kind of see. I see the people that I work with, and yeah, there's the personal element also. So yeah, the game crashed. It was my fault.
Yeah,
There you
to
go.
Marcel's point, if they requested the game could never crash, no one would ever have a job in history. Jeremiah is wondering, I'd like to know more about the warm-up event. Was that something you applied to? Were you accepted for a job by Ubisoft before? Was warm-up like part of the onboarding process or kind of a pre-evaluation period? How did that...
Yeah, yeah. And no, it's a really great thing. I'm pretty sure it's just would be Montreal specifically. So sorry if you're. It's like really small groups. We're like 8 programmers. And yeah, you're sort of hired not for that. You're hired, and then they sort of put you in there. But at that point, I was already like full time. Like I had signed the contract and everything. So it wasn't like you reach the end and then it's like, oh, you weren't good enough. Bye. It wasn't that, thankfully, because that would have been much more stressful. So it was a really great program. But I didn't apply specifically for that. And no, I saw in the chat. I was not accepted for a job before. Like I didn't have an internship. I know many people who did, and they had a good time, but that wasn't my case. In fact, I didn't have an internship at all. Uh, a lot of the warm-up people had like internships in VFX and things like that. So yeah, it was like, hello. So
Gotcha. Any tips about, and I don't know if it's things that might have come out of the interview process or just in your own hindsight, etc., about, when you were working on your portfolio before this versus now afterwards, were there things about it like you'd wish you'd done differently or felt like you're really glad you set up or explained the way you had, or...
things that I wish. Um,
Basically,
hmm.
looking for portfolio tips is the high level.
Yeah, yeah. I think portfolio tips. I don't know. I didn't have my big question with regards to portfolios was like, do you add like a bunch of text and sections that you sort of explain everything? In my case, I had games which are kind of self-explanatory, and my friend who's now made a portfolio of his own had more science stuff, and the science stuff needs more explanation of what am I looking at. So I guess it's more specific, like to each thing. For club games, I had a short description. We can link it. Like if you guys want to see my little website, it's straightforward. There's nothing incredible about it, and it's easy to do with one of your templates, Chris. That I well, you didn't make it, but you posted
Yeah.
the
So
reasons.
speaking of which, I think your portfolio is probably still linked in our LinkedIn and member portfolios Trello
Yeah,
board. I bet people can probably find the URL there.
but
Nice.
yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
Sweet. And as we reach our last few minutes, kind of the same kind of couple questions we always end on. One is essentially if someone specifically was going out to like, I want to be an animation programmer. I want the kind of job you're working in. Any tips or things you'd be like, hey, look up this, or it's going to help you to get some experience doing that?
Um, hmm, Look up this. There's a lot of there is. I think there are GDC talks that you can look at that are really interesting about some of the stuff that's going on. I don't really know specific ones, but I could maybe compile them and post them later. Um, I didn't do like a bunch of animation stuff, but you can, and it would be nice to do it in Unity because it was one of the things that when they interviewed me and they were like, "Have you done this thing before?" I was like, "Not really," and they were a bit disappointed. So if you do, like even just understanding the concepts, which is in Unity, there's already a lot of them, like state machines. What are they? Like blending. I was talking about blending, like just a high level idea of what it is, and if you can sort of do that. And math, yeah, push the math if you can. Not that you need it like all the time every day, but you need to have at least some confidence of like trigonometry, Quaternions, I'm still gonna Google it. I'm not a Quaternion pro. And what else? Yeah, I think don't be afraid to go for a fundamental, like a sciencey background. If that's what you want to do and you have it, say it, and don't say that you want to do gameplay just to get in, because that's not necessarily what they're looking for anyways. And maybe they'll be more interested if you say, no, you know what? Not necessarily my thing. Yeah, math has always been a boss to beat. Yeah, it's an infinite boss with infinite help.
Sweet. The other thing, of course, is where they find you online, your Twitter handle, any other internet presence, portfolio URL, I guess, that you might want to either say, share.
Yeah, I guess there's only my Twitter, which is already probably in the club thing, Omega Larmor, which I'm not really active right now, but you can still, I guess, follow me on that. And other than that, am I active anywhere? I don't think so. I think I'm thinking of doing like a drum channel, like posting drum videos soon. So stay tuned for that if you want to follow. I'm a drummer now.
Yeah, shoot those my way when you can, and I will post those in our Slack, etc. We'll get you another several dozen views.
Mm.
Nice. Aside from that, that's the kind of, about at 1 p.m. So we're about to switch over to our Outpost meeting. I want to thank you so much for being here. This great talk, great Q&A.
Thanks,
People
guys.
should unmute and clap. The audio podcast can't catch your clapping videos. Awesome. Well, sweet. Yeah, so we're going to roll pretty directly into the Outpost meeting. Just to clarify, especially for like last week, we confused one of our newer members. Outpost is a separate set of projects, mostly separate set of members. Anybody who want to hang around as a guest into that can. It's smaller. It's the new second group. If you're just curious to see what's going on there. But otherwise, by all means, also thank you, Star, for hosting our main meeting. We appreciate you. You roll. Congrats, Kung Tu. That game will be up on itch later. HN will figure out if it goes on his itch or the club itch, or we'll sort it out. I will add RoboKeto and rename the channel for the new pitch from Brian. All that stuff will happen, but after this Outpost meeting, which is about to start. So, by anybody who wants to hop between now and next meeting, I'm going to reshare the invite over in the other Outpost channel.
Have a great week.
Bye, Star.